Lee, who is a master's student, almost finished at UBC, and a Mozilla fellow. And he's going to be talking to us about his work in visualization and communication of data. He's a really interesting person, and I can't wait for you guys to get to know him.
Cool. So great to see you all. I can empathize with the master's students in the room that it's crazy. And also, I guess, all the PhD students who went through a master's, because geez Louise, it is a lot of work. It has taken me far too long. So I guess maybe to start, it'd be cool to see how many of you have done like active communication of your research, or like have made an effort to like post blogs about like what you're up to and stuff like that.
I've been wanting to start blogging. I like started the blog, but I haven't actually posted. We have a course blog though that we all post in.
Oh, nice.
I guess that's more specific.
I made a website.
Yay!
It has a blog option. I posted 2 things, but not about my work. But I have it for that purpose, hopefully.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm pretty bad about something.
Oh,
I have a website blur on our lab website. That may be, but
it's all a step in the right direction. It's like whatever it is, it's always good. Yeah, so I mean, this is going to be super informal and just hopefully more conversational. I guess Christy brought me in here to try to, I guess, talk to you about like what are the things you can do to get your stuff out there, and like why there might be incentive to do so, and also like how you can turn like your data and the things that you're working on into stuff that is maybe more accessible to maybe your peers, but also like the public and other audiences that might not otherwise like have access to the stuff that you're working on. And a lot of it has to do with like visualization, but it could be anything to like interpretive dance, or you know, like writing blog posts, or yeah, kind of the whole range of things. So yeah, I guess I'll share my slides with you, and we can kind of use that as a springboard for our conversation. So screen share, and I'm going to do this thing. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, cool. So I'm going to present this thing. Cool. So is it full screen? You're all?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
You're on.
Because it opens up in a different window. So let's try this thing. Of course, it never works out as you would like it to.
Yeah.
One thing I learned in my master's is that there's no such thing as a small task.
Mm-hmm.
Everything takes twice or 3 times as long as you think it's going to take.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm still in school. Let's see. Here. I guess maybe another question while all this is all like loading up is how many of you like want to make like visualizations as a way to communicate your stuff? We got hands. All right.
YouTube, yeah, for my milestones.
Well, we sort of do that through our presentations, right?
Yeah.
That we're giving at meetings and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We not always
So
do it the full way.
Yeah, that's what I'm
secret's always just that it's like clear and that you're thinking about what is the takeaway, you know, when you've got like 20 different variables and things on like one bar plot / scatter plot / you know, like all the things. It's maybe not so cool. Yeah. All right. So I think now it's ready to work. Okay. So let's share these slides. You can just do the entire screen. All right. So, okay. So here we go.
Frozen right now.
Am I live?
Oh, there we go. Yay.
All right, cool. All right. So, okay. So, hi, I'm Joey. That's me standing in my backyard. Just a little bit of background. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm currently based in Vancouver. I studied geography at UCLA and kind of jumped around a bunch between different areas of study. I got really interested in like urban planning for a while. I was like interested in anthropology. I took a bunch of French classes. And then eventually, as one does, I fell into geography because it kind of encapsulated everything else that I could study, but grounded it in space, which I thought was cool. So I ended up writing my undergrad thesis on soil respiration in the tropics, and got a chance to do field work in Puerto Rico, tromped around the forest collecting measurements of soil and CO2 flux using like all this fancy equipment. Worked in a lab for a really long time throughout my year processing all those samples and decided, oh man, like actual lab work is really hard and crushing soils is not as like glorious as I thought it would be. So then I graduated and was, you know, needed to get a job. So I ended up at MIT where I did a research assistantship at the Sensible City Lab. And the Sensible City Lab, they are focused on like urban data sets, like what you can derive from data produced in cities, and what it means then to use that data to make change in the way that we live in cities. And so I spent some time in Boston, and then eventually got shipped over to Singapore, where we were working on data that was being produced by Singapore. And because they've got so much of it there and everything is tracked, it's like a really interesting place to do research because you've just got like all this wealth of data, but not really anyone's thinking about how to use it. So that was like a really cool opportunity. And a lot of the stuff that I was doing was looking at visualization and how to make this data more actionable. And so, yeah, that like really influenced then my trajectory and things. Like science became a lot more about like closing the loop, I guess. Like all this great research was happening, but not that much was being done to communicate it to the public. And what this lab was doing is really focusing on getting that research out to the public and sort of trying to tie in those different groups and the stakeholders that could make sense of that information. Some other things, I lived in the Amazon for 3 months during a semester during my undergrad, and that was like a really crazy experience, just to see what it's like in a place that is changing so rapidly, and I think that also like really cemented my interest in the environment and like the issues surrounding environmental change, like not only like the physical changes that are happening, but the social things that come both as a price of environmental change, but also the things that are driving it. So yeah, and I just really care about the future of the world. So that is kind of me in a nutshell. And so today I'm going to talk to you about how to get your research out there. It's a little bit of a blend between like some of the concepts you want to think about while trying to get research, but also like a little bit of the technical aspects of like what are the tools and possibilities for yeah, throwing your stuff out into the wild. And so for many of us, getting our research out there just means like publishing. You know, we've got all these journals out there. I'm particularly plugging like the open source ones right now, but of course, like the conversation's always around like, oh, we want to, you know, publish in Nature or Science or whatever. That's all great and cool, but at the same time, you're then really limiting access to that knowledge that you're generating. But anyway, so like this could be, this is awesome, you know, that you get published and you sort of cement that knowledge into the world. But like the reality is like 10 people will read it. And even fewer of those people actually understand what you're talking about. But then, you know, it doesn't really have to end there. A lot of times we think of the scientific method and the last part is communicate your results. And I think right now there's a really narrow view of what that looks like. And with the web and with all these tools that we have at the edge or at our fingertips, I think it makes a lot more sense now to start engaging more audiences, because there's this thing now called science communication. This has always been around, but there are like a lot more venues, I think, that especially the web is providing to get your stuff out into the open and to start those conversations that might otherwise not happen because it's locked behind a paywall, and so on. And so I kind of just want to start with a few examples of things that are happening right now that I think are really cool, and just to kind of give you an idea of like what's the spectrum of things that you can do to participate in this realm of science communication. And this thing is called like anecdotal evidence, this first slide here. And it's basically it's both an event and like a sort of a podcast-esque thing, where every few months people get together and they tell a story about their research. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the results of your research, but it can be like, yeah, that's Andrew. I met him recently and he's so super cool. I would love to be better friends with him. I hope one day he hears me say this. He's super, super cool.
I feel like you guys should hang out. You're both at peace.
Yeah, I have the feeling that we'd be good friends. And so, yeah, you can like go onto this website and it's like I think these happen at like a bar in Vancouver. And you can just explain something that happened during the time of your research. It could be a funny story. It could be like a moving story. It's just more of a way to communicate about like the process of science and not necessarily about like, yeah, all the crazy things that you've found, but all those things that get left out of your papers, you know, like that time when you're tromping around in the forest and a scorpion bit you and, you know, you have to be airlifted out. You know, like stuff like that, I think really adds like this human component to science, like that we're just all normal people just doing things that we're interested in. And I think it adds a lot to the like accessibility of science and that part of the discussion. So that's like one thing that maybe there is something at MSU that is around something like this, or maybe you can start it. You know, it's like just gonna plant the seed out there that there are lots of options for communicating in alternative ways, I guess. The next thing I want to show is this project called population.io. It is a project by the World Bank and EASA. They're, I think they do like demographics and statistics in, they're based in Vienna in Austria. And the idea is that these researchers at EASA, they created a big, massive data set on the future population statistics based on a bunch of models. And the World Bank wanted to take that and make that accessible to the public and basically build a visualization around like what are the implications of this data and really like personalize it. So like what you can do is type in like when you're born. So let's just say like January 1st. USA, and let's say male. And what this visualization is about is like sort of placing you in the context of the rest of the world and the United States. So you can see like so 35% of people are younger than me in the US, and 44% of people are younger than me in the US. And you can kind of go through this story of your life, and it uses all the data from that was generated in this research that these people were doing. This is like a bigger project that 7, 8, 9 different people were collaborating on. They had statistics people, they had like the data visualization people, they had like the designers, like the web developers, like all working on this together. And I think it's kind of neat to see how you can create this data story from a data set that you might otherwise not into, because it's just like this massive table. And I think at the end, it even gives you like an estimate of when you might die. So I've got the 6th of January here if I was born on the 1st of January in 1990. And so you can also see like, depending on where you live, like what is your expected life, your life expectancy. And you can like also, I think, add this to your iCalendar of like when your expected date of death would be, and so on. So it's pretty nuts how far you can go with trying to communicate about a project. And this one in particular got a lot of traction. I think Bill Gates even tweeted it, and after that, like the servers exploded and they had to like ramp up their situation. So yeah, this is just one example of like one thing that you might see out there communicating data and science in some way that is a result of like lots of people working on it together. And I would say that if you have an idea that you think is really great, you don't have to be the only one to like program it and make it yourself. Like there's so many communities out there that want to be involved in science. And this is something that we talk about a little bit later, and how you can like wrangle them in to make cool stuff that is meaningful for other people. So that's population.io. This is this is like the blog post of this guy, Matt, and he's based at UBC, and he just does like really nice posts, like blog posts on like how to do some exploration of some data set. And I think this is like one really nice example of science communication in almost its like rawest sense, in that like you know, he just had this idea that like in 2015, there was a birder named Noah Stryker. And he just this guy wanted to go, I think, for a full year and just go birding and just like see how many different bird species he could find. And this blog post is just about how he did this analysis. And yeah, I think this is like, in a way, if you can imagine, like if this was your master's research, like you would literally just blog about like how you did the thing that you were doing. And when you're thinking about, I guess, your audience of like who to like benefit from the communication that you're doing, I think the cool thing is that like if you have your collaborators and you're like trying to explain to them like what your code is doing and stuff, and they are like horribly frustrated with you, communicating your work in this way could be like just a really nice outlet. And yeah, so like, you know, there's like all of the code that does the particular thing. So yeah, I just wanted to show that as like a way of thinking about visualization and science communication is like not only for these like broader audiences like population IO, but where you can be communicating more effectively to the people that will like take your research and build upon it and so on. So that's Matt's work. This is a funny project called Selfie City. And these researchers and designers got together to explore the landscape of selfies across the world. And they have like all these interesting findings, like, let's see, like more women take selfies than men. And let's see, there's different cities that they analyzed. And again, this is like another example of like how far you can go in terms of like making your data, like turning your data into like a data story. You can see like tilt angles of people's heads, you know, like in these selfies. So like, you know, and you can see that like this is a web page, but it's more than a web page. It's kind of like an experience. You know, they've created like a whole like palette around like what you're going to be like looking at here. You know, they've got like, if you're looking at this page, like they've chosen a certain type of font. They've made decisions about like what colors they want to show. All of the graphs are related with those similar colors. And when you're thinking about like coherency and like and this like user experience, I think these are the types of things that your brain doesn't immediately register. Like you're like, oh wow, like all the color palette's like really great, and like all the graphs and stuff match together. But I think these are those like subtle details that like make visualizations like more effective and powerful when when you're like looking at stuff and you're like, man, for some reason this looks really great, but I don't know why. It's like trying to pick apart those different aspects that build the full thing. And we also talk about this later. And there's a great talk about this called Everything But the Chart. And so I think that's kind of a way of thinking that like visualization is more than just having a pretty graphic, but it's about like the text that goes around it, the type, you know, like if you're going to be scrolling or clicking through different images and stuff, there's like a whole bunch of other things around just a graph that makes visualization powerful. So yeah, that's kind of a fun project around that. And here's like more of like a video-based thing. And this is just a short video called The Domino Effect. And it's by a grad student at UBC who's part of this program called TerraWeb, which is focused on graduate student training for science communication. And so it's like pretty short, pretty cute about the domino effect in species extinction. Oh, I guess maybe. Can you hear the sound, or is that probably not?
Not great.
Okay. Okay, well, maybe let's leave that one for another time, so it's not.
Yeah, we can watch it after.
Yeah, but basically they have all these dominoes with the the faces of these animals, and they're talking about how if one species dies, then or goes extinct, then what happens to the others, and it's just plays on that domino effect thing. So yeah, there's video, and I think this may be the last one, but this is a project called Untangling Tennis, and it's by Kim Albrecht. He is in Boston at Northeastern, I believe. And what they did is they wanted to use data around or information about tennis players and see what is the relationship between tennis players and like their web fame, and like if their web fame is correlated to their performance. And so they've got like all these different buttons you can choose to sort through the data. And it gives you just like how many page views they had, and if there's like, if you could predict what their page views would be, and so on. And so, yeah, this is just like another example of like an interface in which you can, you as a user can explore the data and gain insights from the thing on your own, rather than having the results like simply told to you. And I think like when you have like exploratory stuff together with those like key insights that you would want people to find, I think you can really push, I don't want to say like agenda, but you can really push a message a lot further than when you simply just tell people stuff. I think when people get a chance to like play with something, they can like draw on that experience as something that's something like a little bit more impressionable or like more lasting. So yeah, that's the tennis thing. And so like the list goes on. And I think the reality is that like this is just like a small fraction of science that's really being communicated. There's like tons and tons of like journal articles that are being published every day, but we don't really get to know or see what's happening in them. I mean, in large part because like maybe there's just not enough capacity, there's simply not enough people to do all the work that's necessary to like build all these fancy websites or to blog about them. But the thing is that like we should be motivated to communicate our work. Science in many cases is publicly funded, and I think we as scientists, like our mission is to advance like the global understanding of like what it is that we're doing and what we're interested in. And I think what's missing in that conversation is like the public, and simply the excuses that of our work being too esoteric or like too difficult to translate or whatever is not really valid, because how do you have like millions of people supporting your work and have it not be relevant to them? It just seems like we have forgotten that the important thing is that people can be part of this dialogue. And I think part of that also is like when you can address broader audiences, you could lead to like more innovation or like inspire other people to look at the world differently. I've been like consistently or like constantly surprised by like how creative people can be, and like how they can take some idea that like I've thrown out there with a project and turn it into something completely different that I wouldn't have thought about. Like one project, for example, a friend of mine and I like found a lot of all the pools in Los Angeles from satellite imagery. And then we had requests from people like saying, hey, can you find all the lawns in Florida so that we can like market our product to these lawn owners, you know, like stuff like that. And I wouldn't have thought about that as like an offshoot of a project where we found pools, but somehow people make linkages that you might not think of. So I think in a way, science communication opens up a lot of doors for innovation and just collaboration. And I mean, another thing is that like when you do like science communication, you're putting a face to your research, you're putting a face like on the work that you do. And I think it's a good way to attract like funding, and if not funding, at least more interest. Having like a web presence certainly is a good way to like, attract collaborators or to show like the stuff that you've been working on. And I think if you can point like funding agencies or whoever to a web page of the things that you've been working on, it can be quite a powerful thing. And I mean, the thing is like you do this stuff every day and people are probably really wondering like what it is that you're up to. So it's also cool to have a place to like point them to. And then like lastly, like advocacy, like depending on what it is that you're doing, for me, it's like climate change. I think that's like a huge issue that still requires a lot of advocacy, and somehow people just don't get it. But I think because there's still like a rift, it's really important to like make a stance and say like, these are the things that, these are the pieces of evidence that are pointing to a particular fact of the world, and so on. And like to get to like all of these science communication like things, like all these projects that you see out in the world, it's like a massive process. I mean, massive in the sense that like it does take a lot of effort, but it is very procedural. It's not like, you just create this visualization out of thin air and it's awesome. Like it takes like multiple iterations. It takes like lots of different types of skills, like to go from some sort of data to some understanding of that information. You're doing a lot of different steps. So like in this graph, you see like we start kind of with computer science, we move into like math and statistics, and then there's some component of like graphic design or like visualization with some program. And then there's like a very human element where you're thinking about like, how do people interact with this information? What are they going to get out of it? And so this kind of goes in a loop like over and over again while you're going through the process of trying to make sense of what it is that you're studying. And I think it's really helpful to think about these things as a process because in the end, what you think that often like what you think you want to communicate evolves into something that something completely different or matures over the process of like doing data visualization or science communication. So I think just keeping this in mind is really important. And yeah, I mean, like, so part of this process means like sketching out your ideas. So like physically on paper, just to get them out there and to see like what it is in your mind, like the optimal outcome would be. Like coding, for example, takes a lot of effort. So if you have this thing that you want to communicate, it's often cool to like sketch it out and also like wireframe them. So for those of you who have never heard the term like wireframe, it means like, it's like an advanced sketch, but something a little bit closer to like what the reality of the thing might look like. So like here, like I've sketched out like what the web browser window might look like. I have like all of the things that like you might interact with on the page. So like the map zooms and pans to a region. There's some expressive animation for the thing that's being highlighted. There's some like interface decisions, like these are going to be buttons that look like little arrows. and so on. So like, I think turning your sketches into something a little bit more tangible, like more like based on the final product is really handy, because you don't want to be really fiddling around like with all of these little minutiae like details when you're really trying to like get the interactions right. So wireframing is a good way to sort of suss out those what your interactions might look like. And then like prototyping them. So after, you might draw up some wireframes, like whether it's you might like start building the thing. And this is like another process of iteration. So like you might build like a web page, and you might just like throw everything onto the page, and then get feedback. Oftentimes like the first version that you make is not going to be the last one. And there's always things that can be changed, like, you use something else besides Helvetica, and like you don't mix serif and serif font. Like, why are all the font sizes different? And like, why do you have like weird different colors of gray, and like, and so on. So like, there's always things that you can sort of improve on. And I think knowing that it's about going through these things over and over again is always crucial. And so, yeah, I think in the end, it's really about like designing some experience around the thing that you want to communicate. And like, when I say like, use the word like design or like designing, it's really about like this procedural way of thinking, rather than like being a designer. I think there's oftentimes like, oh, to be a designer, you need to be able to make like fancy graphics and stuff. But I think it's more about this process of like going through this loop over and over again. And yeah, of like just coming up with like the optimal solution from the things that, from the sort of the problem that you proposed in the beginning. And so this experience could be like interactivity, exploration, translation, or all of those things. But then, like now we're sort of getting into like, how do we do all these things? And this image is really funny, I think, because it's related to mapping and like how does one make like a web map? And I'm sorry, my my mom is messaging me. Sorry, Mom. So like in this image, it says this guy wants to learn GIS by reading books and academic papers and articles about geospatial data, map projection, server-side technologies, databases, different geospatial standards and protocols and implementations, and available range of server and client software, perform analysis of the data, preferably involving other GIS specialists, and do a lot of other research so that I can make sensible decisions about the required technology stack adjusted to the needs of my application, finally make a fucking map. And I think this seems like the case, like to make anything, there's a billion things before it. I mean, it can be really overwhelming. And so I think the key is just to start small. There's of course like a bunch of different pathways, but I think the key is really to just start with those wireframes, or start with that really sketchy scatter plot, and see like what it is that really is important about that data that you want to communicate. And I think collaboration is like a huge way forward. You saw with like the Population IO project, or with the Selfie City thing. Like that's not something that like one person could build alone, but that's more of a result of like many people contributing their skills and the things that they're best at. And so keeping that in mind is like a really good way to feel empowered about like about not limiting yourself to the skills that you have currently. And so there's this great video by Ira Glass about the creative process, and I would all encourage you to watch it. I think because the sound kind of sucks, maybe it's not so great. There's text here, so maybe we can just, I can narrate it. But in this video, so saying that like nobody tells people that are beginners is that anyone who's doing creative work, get into it because you have good taste. But there's this gap in like the first few years that you're making stuff, is that like what you're making isn't so good. It's trying to be good and has like the ambition to be good, but it's really not. And like your taste is really killer, but the reality is that everything is still disappointing to you, of the things that like you're sort of making. And so at that point, like people just quit. Oh man, this is really hard. Yeah, but like the idea is that like when you start making like things, like doing any sort of activity, there's this huge gap between like what your brain thinks it wants, like, or thinks that it can do, and the reality of what you're able to produce with the skills that you have. And it's only by like making a ton of work that you can really like close that gap. And this is just like my folder structure of like things, like all the projects that I'm working on. And this like sandbox folder happens to have just like all these different pieces of technology that I've been wanting to try. And just to show you that like it takes like a ton of time and effort to like get to a place where you think you can start making things at the level that you want. And I'm still super far from this, and it's horribly painful for me because I spend so much time thinking about it, and doing this stuff that I feel like, man, why am I so slow at this? But at the same time, it takes making these projects that feel unfulfilled to get to a point in which you do feel fulfilled with the things that you're making. And so like, here's like another project, and I'll just like kind of play the video without the sound. But it's a video of like the 3.4 trillion trees that researchers found, or like counted basically across the world using models and like in-field validation. And the graphic is like really compelling. Like, and this was all programmed using the data and a programming language called processing. And, you know, there's like text, or there's commentary behind the video, like, oh, there's like 3.4 trillion trees, and these researchers did all this research, and you can see the density of trees and so on. And so like, you know, in our minds, like this is what we should be making. Like this is like where this is how I want to communicate like my research. But the reality is that like it mostly just turns out to something like this. That's like not that, that's like completely underwhelming. That's like just these maps with like horrible legends and like horrible colors. And like, and this is actually a map that I made like back in my undergrad, which I found like just digging around on the internet. I should probably take them down so nobody finds them. But yeah, like this is just how it starts, and I think it's totally okay to be in this place, because there's so many technical and non-technical things, and I think you have to start somewhere. So I would all encourage you just to like get stuff out there, start blogging, like start posting to your portfolios, and use your web presence, or like that web whatever, as like an archive of like your progression. And I think it's cool to take ownership of that, and have like your web pages. You know, there's different philosophies on this, but I think it's kind of cool to see the graveyard of projects, to see how people have grown over time. And so like, where do we start? Like, I know you are all like learning R, and that's like the super Swiss Army knife of everything, of like from visualization to communication and stuff. But there's like so many different things that you can do. You know, there's like programming, and learning how to visualize data through that. There's like public speaking. There's like journalistic writing that's different from science writing. Like video and photography. There's like podcasting, like dance or performance. Like there's so many different ways to like foster that interaction between the stuff that you're doing and your audience. But I think besides like all the technical things, the important bit is to develop the community around, or like dive into the community around like what you're interested in. So I'm sure Christy has like harped on you about the Mozilla study groups. I'm not sure if you use Meetup, but meetup.com is a place where you can find people with like similar interests, and you actually meet up in a physical space. And the ethos behind Meetup is it's something that happens regularly. So you can always sort of count on there being like a continued effort to like meet up together. And like just taking advantage of like the local things that make your city or like your place like special, and taking advantage of those groups. And of course on the web, there's like always ways to access those people out there. And so, man, I'm just like going on and on. I'll try to wrap it up a bit. So like, how do you make your thing? There's kind of these major points. And of course, like there's the research, like there's the thing that makes like the whole bread and butter of what you're doing is like the important thing that you're studying or that you're researching. And then there's like coming up with a story about that research that you've done. And I think having a vision and like a clear direction is something that like often gets left out of the conversation. Oftentimes I find in science that the scientists like want to communicate their work, and they're like, we want it to be this web app that's got all these features and they can do this and this and this and this. But they have so that's like the vision, but they have no direction about how they're gonna like make that happen. It's just like all of these really like grandiose ideas. And I think it's really important to have at least an idea of like what the direction is going to be. It's like, oh, we want to make a first prototype that just does this. And I think to build like Lego blocks like on top of that direction rather than trying to build like Rome in a day, I think is really important. And of course, there's like the tools, the technology, and the time. And those are things that, yeah, it's like a balance between like what you're comfortable with and yeah, exactly, like what venue you want to be communicating in. And of course, like, yeah, you need to get all these skills, which is not so trivial. And so you're like, what? This is crazy. There's like a million things I have to do. And so then, like, how do you start with this, which is like this crazy JSON file of data to get to something like this, which is a map, like an animated map showing 311 phone calls in Vancouver. And there's tools, or you write code. And so, like for the example of the animated map, there's tools like CartoDB, which is like a web mapping platform that has like a bunch of amazing tutorials. Like I've made a whole bunch of tutorials, or maybe a few tutorials on this. And there's just a big community around like wanting to teach this stuff. So if you look up CartoDB and like web mapping, this is like a great way to get started with making web maps in a way that you would never have thought you could do, especially with data that you're working on, and visualize it like really quickly. So yeah, you can use like some tool that's provided, or you can code it yourself using like JavaScript or R or Python or whatever. There's all these fancy like libraries or packages for doing all this stuff. So those are kind of the options. And of course, there's like disadvantages and advantages to both. On one hand, using the available tools are easier to use, and they have like all these advanced functions that would be really difficult to program yourself because they've got like expert people like coding this on their end. But maybe you have to pay at some point, and that can be a limiting factor. But if you code it yourself, then you have the flexibility to like make whatever you want. You can remix projects that other people have done already, so you can build on things that others have done. And it's a learning opportunity because the more new things that you learn, the more exciting you as a person can be. But time and expertise is expensive, so that's like a huge consideration. So if we take How am I doing on time, Christy? Do I have to wrap up in like a few minutes, or do I have a little bit?
For time. Yeah, we can go a little after 4.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it won't be too long. And so let's just take like this simple example. And it's just a map that I made in R, and actually it's an R leaflet, which is, so leaflet is like a web mapping library that's written in JavaScript, but
Uh-oh, we've lost your sound.
for R, legend, you can like toggle on different points and stuff.
Okay, we've lost your video now.
Uh-oh, yeah, they were like,
There it is, okay.
you've exceeded your bandwidth. But yeah, so it's like just a simple web map. It's like super bare bones, right? So there's like some layering that you can like toggle on and off, and you can like click on stuff. And I would say that this is, would be kind of cool as just a little blog post of like, here's my initial exploration of this data. I wonder like what I'll find next. And that was using, yeah, again, like R leaflet. And I think this is like a good place to discuss sort of your proof of concept. This is, yeah, just a way of showing like, hey, this thing is possible, but it's bare bones, and there's definitely a lot more that you might be able to glean out from the data set if you take it a bit further. And so you might take that previous thing and build it into something a little bit more sophisticated, with like this, with like a better interface. You have like a nicer legend here, and like this experience of like going around is just a bit nicer, where like, you might hover over a point and there'll be an image. I guess the links to those images are not broken, but you kind of get the idea that like there is this process of like refinement and like knowing that you can take things like to the next level, I guess. And just to sort of explain like how these things come together, you've got like R or Python for like all your data wrangling, statistics and insights, and the things the key messages that you've found in your data set. And then you might go either like straight from R straight to the web. And I show GitHub here as a way of showing that like GitHub Pages is like a great place to host your web content for free, like your static web pages. Like GitHub will do automatically. So even though GitHub or Git and GitHub, like that whole process can be really daunting, there are a lot of really nice advantages of using GitHub as a platform. And so, yeah, you might go from R directly into GitHub, or you might then take the data that you've produced in R and then shove it into some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript framework, and start building stuff from there to sort of tease out way more of those interactions. Yeah, so that's like kind of a typical workflow. And just to show like another example, we've got this thing called the flavor connection. And it's an interactive piece by the Scientific American. And these scientists wanted to link together like common flavor compounds found in like different ingredients. And so there's like this explanation of how to use this graphic. And what you can do is like you can click on strawberry, and the strawberry will like lead you to like, oh, white wine. There's like a linkage to apple, oranges, cranberries, and so on. See if I click on like blue cheese, there's like linkages to like Parmesan cheese, like rum, coconut. So it's like just kind of like an interesting way of presenting a data set with some interactive stuff. And what they use to build this thing is probably R or Python to do some of like the data wrangling that they had to like glean out and like to make those connections between those various those food compounds. They use like obviously web technology to get that interactive thing up there. And they're most likely using this thing called D3. Maybe some of you have heard of it, but it's a JavaScript library for doing data visualization. If you type in D3.js like online, you'll find like all these really beautiful examples. It's the learning curve is quite high, but there's like lots of great YouTube videos, and there's a great book by Scott Murray, which I posted into the resources for this today's presentation. And yeah, there's like it's definitely worth checking out if you're thinking about like souping up your charts and making them like uber fancy. And yeah, again, at the end of the pipeline, there's sort of like a server out there that's serving this content. And so sort of almost to close. So R is like your Swiss Army knife. I think you guys learned ggplot recently, and that's really amazing. There's things like R charts, which is like an interactive R charting library, and R leaflet, which is like the interactive web mapping library for R. And when you combine that with like R Markdown, you already have something cool that's like on the web. You can like export to an HTML file, and if you can just post that as your post, you've got like your text and your plots, and everything's kind of really nicely organized. And those I think make like really nice, nice posts for communicating your work. And like I mentioned, like you'll need some sort of platform. So like GitHub Pages is great for that. Like Jekyll as like a blogging platform can be a little tricky to set up, but it uses GitHub Pages as a way to like serve up all that content. So you can just throw markdown files into like a folder on your computer, and then it'll just serve that stuff right up, which is cool. But on the other hand, there's also WordPress and Tumblr and all these really great services. So also, yeah, there's no lack of places to throw your stuff. And then, there's like I mentioned earlier, there's like everything except the chart. So there's like the making of a web page. There's like the user interface, which is like a really crucial part of things. There's like all the static content, like images and videos. I really like videos and how they are like a really good way to sum up like everything that you've done, or to like really quickly explain about a topic that in 30 seconds or less, or like a minute. And I think that's kind of cool. And then there's like all the testing. And if you make like a custom visualization, maybe it only works on Chrome but not Firefox, or vice versa. Or maybe your font comes out all crazy in Safari. If you want to get into the nitty gritty, that's always like one thing. And one thing I also like to mention is like to have a call to action. Like when you make a visualization, your call to action could just be simply that like we found out all this stuff, like this is stuff that you should know, or it could be like, hey, contribute to my project. If you're like a software developer, like or like a designer, like if you want to help make the next version, that would be great. And like fielding help and contributions is always cool. Or again, like finding collaborators to like build on the type of work that you've done, and so on. And then like reaching out to press is really important. Like if you've built something that you're proud of, and it is relevant to people, I think there's a really important aspect of getting that out there and reaching out to press, and not being afraid that they won't value your work. I often find that like people are really hungry for stories, and there's often a way to get that integrated into like local news, or even like out there in like bigger platforms like Wired or Gizmodo and so on. So I would say like don't be afraid to like reach out if you think you have something worth talking about, because I think you'd be surprised at like how often journalists and stuff are like, wow, this is really great. I'm so glad that you like reached out to me about this like thing that seems esoteric, but is relevant. So definitely do that. And lastly, collaboration. So like when you, like earlier there was those really massive projects. And I think the reality is that there's like a ton of people that really want to be involved in science, but just simply don't know how. And a lot of those people aren't driven by like financial compensation. Like they just want to be part of something meaningful. Like I've met so many people who are like software developers or people that work for these like big companies that aren't really fulfilled with the work that they're doing. But when I mention like when I need help with stuff, I often find that people are really like hungry to like help out. And so finding help in unexpected places is something that's really great when it comes to collaboration and also building something like larger than you. But like collaboration also takes a lot of work. And you need to be like flexible to like work with people and not be so much like their boss. I think it's really important to like maintain like a good working relationship, and trying to figure out what that is really difficult, because scientists have like a really different working mode than designers and artists. And I think making sure to have good conversations around this and to like make that code of conduct or those contributing guidelines are super important. And maybe Christy can help you get set up with all those different aspects on your side. And then like, again, like how to find collaborators. It's like in your community, like through meetups, reach out to friends, like say what's up to Mozilla. Like we're always super down to help out. And if we can't help out, then we know definitely people that can. So, and there's like platforms like Creatives for Science, which I'm actually meeting the founder of in 20 minutes. So I have to get going pretty soon. And that's focused on building out the more artistic parts of projects, of science projects, and so on. And then like, how do you learn like the web? You know, like I just threw like all this stuff at you. Like you're gonna need to learn how to code in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You need to learn how to like set up a server and blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of resources to learn and how to get started. And I really love like P5JS and the coding rainbow with Dan Schiffman, because it's not just about learning how to code, but learning around like all the different aspects of like being technologically literate. So I think that is worth looking at. Mozilla Thimble is a cool way to understand like how like the web, all of those different pieces like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript like are speaking to each other. So definitely check that out. Like Free Code Camp is like kind of a fun interactive way of learning how to code like web-based stuff too. And then I've got like a bunch of resources at blogs.ubc.advanced cartography resources, blah, blah, blah. There's like a bunch of learning resources there for a class that I taught last year. And there's like a whole bunch of nice examples. Check them out. And yeah, thanks. That's about it.
Well, thanks so much, Joey. That was awesome. So,
are you guys okay? Are your brains like, is your brain like melting out of like your ears? Yeah, questions, comments, feedback?
We've got a lot of work to do, I can tell. But
That was great. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish I had left more time for discussion.
Have you heard of the Journal of Visualized Experiments?
yeah.
I've probably come across it. Sorry?
Your talk just reminded me of it. It's like a way you can post videos of experimental designs and outcomes. It's kind of like a journal article that's completely visual.
Yeah, it's like the only peer-reviewed video journal.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, like that's exactly what I think science needs more of.
So there's that, which is cool. But all of the resources you provided are also sound so nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, if you need like help or like are curious about like what's the best pathway to like learn certain things or whatever, like definitely just reach out and say what's up. Because like, yeah, there's always people, I think generally people who are interested in like technological literacy are like really, really open to just like lending a helping hand. So yeah, definitely holler.
Cool, thank you. Well, I guess we should probably wrap up, but thank you so much, Joey.
Thanks.
Your meeting.
Thank you. I'll see you very soon.
Let us know how it goes.
Will do. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao.